Hello, this is Jenna McKenzie's strategy presentation. Since this is just a screen recording and not an actual recording of me, I included a photo of me and one of my favorite basketball players, that is Torian Prince and I last week. Um, After looking through my lesson plan, I matched up a few strategies to what I had the kids doing in my made up class. As far as pre reading activities, I didn't really do anything to prepare them to hear this book, this thing I'm calling Book of the Day, because in my class we do a book every day. So this is the book of the day, a picture book of Anne Frank. Unfortunately, I didn't have a copy right now to show you, but I do have this picture of the cover. That's actually why this is late, because I was waiting for my book to come in, but it didn't come in yet. So it's just complicated. Anyway, so I did do, however, during reading activities and then post reading activities. So while I was reading the book, the kids will be in their pre designated reading buddies, sharing a copy of the book, following along with me. And by that I mean I've partnered up the kids in advance throughout the school year so that whenever I'm reading a book to the class, hopefully I'd have enough to give each partnership a book and they will be following along with me. Um, so I actually use this to say that they are doing visualizing while we read because they're looking at the images of the book together as I go through the words with them. Um, so they're sort of visualizing what it was like for these people who went through the Holocaust. After reading the book, I would open the floor to questions, starting with the EQs I had created, which I had emailed you about, Dr. Short, and you helped me, broaden what I was asking about. Um, so then this is sort of getting them to step outside of themselves and really consider what it was like to live during this time, during the horrendous things that are happening to these Jewish people and these people that were designated as other. Um, they would also get to talk, and this would sort of act like a think aloud because I know that whenever I watched in my internship the Holocaust unit going on in social studies, the kids had a really hard time grasping what exactly something this horrible meant. And I think that they really needed some more time to be able to talk about it to process what they were hearing because they could not wrap their minds around the fact that these people had no choices. They had no real say in any of the things that happened to them. And they just were not understanding that. Obviously, they come from a democracy, they come from the United States. They're very young. They've never seen any sort of subjugation like this. Um, so after those are my during reading strategies. So my post reading strategies, I actually have a few of. I employed visualizing, note taking, and synthesizing. And there were actually three ways I did visualizing, I thought, which is through the think aloud after we read. Then I, in my lesson plan, specify that I will have images of World War II and the Holocaust, like survivors of the Holocaust, the children that were starving, the gates of Auschwitz, some propaganda images, scrolling along the through the projector so that the kids kind of are looking at something and processing, real historical images. So this I also said was visualizing because then they can also tie it to what they saw in the book. And then there was actually this cool project thing that I came up with that I said that I'd been doing throughout the entire school year, which was a timeline for each student. And I would obviously be making a bigger class version of the timeline. So each unit, I would give the students a segment of the timeline, and I picture this as just picture pieces of printer paper that they would attach together on the long end and make a extremely long piece of paper that I would provide them images to put on, dates to put on, events to put on, important people, and for each unit, they would get to label the time period and sort of have this literal visual um, to go with what they're learning. So like they would have Anne Frank, and then the kids would get like a little note card that they'd put on there that would describe who Anne Frank was or and why she was significant and things like that. So each kid is coming up with their own timeline, and during class time, when I give them time to work on it, I would be working on the class one so they would see a model of what to do. And at this point in the school year, during World War II and the Holocaust, that would be during second semester. So they would be very used to this activity by then. Um, so it wouldn't require a ton of modeling right then, but they would get to see what I was doing. So the next thing we did was note taking, which we took notes over the lead up to World War II, Adolf Hitler, and the Holocaust. And I pulled these notes almost directly from the Georgia Standards of Excellence website. So they are covering exactly what the kids need to know for fifth grade Georgia social studies. But it'll also sort of be a synthesizing activity because it'll take what they heard from the book and the images and sort of put them all together and have like a broader historical understanding of Anne Frank and of this time period. And I do think that this is synthesizing their learning along with the literal visual that they created with the timeline. The timeline, when I say the timeline, I specify in the lesson plan that they will basically, on the first day of the text set, just be cutting out the images and things that I give them to put on it and putting them in the little baggie, because they wouldn't have enough time to actually construct it and do all the things I want them to do with it on the first day. But it'll be something that they start completing throughout the unit. Of the Holocaust and more broadly World War II and so on like that. So these are the strategies that I used for after reading this particular book, and my anchor text is actually Number the Stars, which I would also start reading on this day because I want to do a sort of historical fiction narrative writing project, I guess you could call it, that is kind of the culminating activity of my entire text set lesson plans. So I know you said to keep the strategy presentation focused on the first day of the text set, but I am so excited about the project that I've created that I actually sort of wrote up a little script here of like talking through how it all sort of pieces together. So most of the books in my text set are historical fiction, and since I'm ELA as well as social studies, I had to do a writing activity. So each day we'll be reading from our anchor text, Number the Stars, along with our book of the day. So in my lesson plan, I have sort of like a weird outline of what I'm going to do for each day before I actually put it into the template. And since we already talked about day one, I'll just move on to day two. So the next day, they'll be reading The Yellow Star, which is an embellished version of the King of Denmark during the Nazis' occupation, and it sort of paints him out to be a hero. None of it is verified historically. They say some things are true. I can't find a place that definitively says that this book is accurate, so it is more accurately historical fiction. So we will also, on the second day, be watching a short video in French with subtitles of a woman's account of her experience in a concentration camp. And obviously, since it has subtitles and it's in French and she's talking at a normal human's pace of speech, I'll be pausing periodically to make sure the kids are following along with what she's saying and following the story, because I know reading subtitles sometimes for especially younger kids at that speed is really hard, and then on top of that, processing what she's saying. And then we'll also be watching the video from the 6 Million Paperclip Project that day. That way they can sort of get an idea of, what people have done in response to the Holocaust, and, even more so getting an idea of like the fact that 6 million people were killed, like 6 million Jewish people were killed. And I know that when I was making the notes, and 3 more million people were killed that were considered other, like gay people, handicapped people, things like that. So the 6 Million Paperclip Project doesn't even cover those people. So we'll sort of be talking about that. I won't go into too much detail for this day because it isn't the one I'm excited to tell you about. But I think knowing what the kids have seen and read up to this point is important. So I'll move on to day 3. but also on day 2, obviously come back to our anchor text and at the end of class, or um, at a certain point in class. I haven't really decided when, but we will be reading at least some of Number of the Stars. So on the third day, the book of the day is The Whispering Town, which is a fictional story from a young Christian girl's perspective, where she and her family are hiding a Jewish mother and son from Nazis in her basement, and how she helps them escape. So this is written very young, I would say, and it's sort of like a feel good story about how a little girl can make a big difference. Um, and I think that this will help them with the culminating activity. So on this day in my lesson plan is when my big awesome strategy starts. So I present to them their writing assignment, which is you're going to write yourself or a realistic character into one of the books we've read this week. Obviously, this is just day 3, which is Wednesday, so they haven't read all the books yet. So you'll have to include at least one reference to a real date, event, or famous important person from the time, at least 2 terms we've learned in this unit, which could be something like concentration camp, and in that little specification it says you may ask the teacher beforehand if your terms are sufficient. We'll talk about what sufficient means. You will also have to address your 5 senses in your historical fiction piece: touch, taste, smell, sight, and sound. So once I present to them the prompt that they're being asked to answer on the 5th day, Friday, we are going to come up with a rubric of things we want to see and how I am going to score the writing together as a class, um, which I think is really powerful, letting the kids have a say in how I'm going to judge their writing. It really empowers them to do better and to say what they want to see, and they'll know that they have to include these things and they have to write a certain way with the capital letters and the punctuation and things like that. So obviously we'll also be reading some of Number of the Stars because it is the anchor text, and this could be the story they choose to write themselves into. um so day 4, I put the kids into groups based on behaviors, IEPs, 504s, interest level, things like that. And they'll be sitting in sort of stations with big chart paper and sticky notes. On the chart paper will be a big stick person that I'll draw with boxes at their eyes, mouth, nose, hands, and heart. There will be boxes labeled events, people, and dates off to the side. I haven't drawn it yet, or I would include a photo of it, but I will include photos of it for when I turn in the actual text set so you can see what I'm actually saying. Um, so the kids will have to put at least one sticky note with their name on it in each box of the big chart paper. They'll be told it's fine if someone has already put what they wanted to put, but it would be better if they came up with their own thing for each box. They'll be free to look at the books we've read so far and for any help, and the same thing goes for their notes. So this will be sort of their pre-writing activity for their historical fiction piece, except they're going to be doing it in groups and they're going to be able to discuss these things. Um, Oh, and I forgot to mention, before we did any of this, we read our book of the day, The Featherbed Journey, which is a fictional story about a Jewish family who is listening to their grandmother, which is her right here, tell about surviving the Holocaust. So that's pretty interesting. Um, Hopefully we will have time at the end of the class, after they've put their sticky notes into the boxes they want on the chart paper, to read our anchor text, Number of the Stars. So on day 5, the kids will sit with their groups from the day before, day 4, and read our book of the day, The Harmonica. This is actually the only book that is nowhere in any of the things I have sent to you so far, Dr. Short, because I actually just ordered it today on Amazon because I realized I didn't have a 5th book that I wanted them to read for the 5th day that was like appropriate for the new idea I had with this writing activity. So on day 5, we read the harmonica. After that, the kids will be using the graphic organizer to write the rest of this for the rest of the social studies period. Once they're done, they'll start working on a drawing of a picture or a moment from their story that must include their main character that they wrote in, either themselves or the realistic character. And since I'm the ELA person as well, we would use this piece to sort of do editing and peer review and publishing in language arts. That way, they could sort of have a finished product, published piece once they're finished, and then we could display them, and it would be our historical fiction unit. Um, and obviously, in 5 days, with all of the things I got going on, we won't be able to finish. Oh, I thought I had a picture of it. Number the Stars in time. So it would either continue to be read in social studies, or it would become the novel that's being read in language arts, and then social studies would continue to have its book of the day or a even shorter novel or something like that, that would go along with the new unit that's being covered. I'm not sure how I would play that one, just because I'm not actually in the classroom and I'm not with the kids I would teach because they aren't real. But that is basically my plan for what I got going on for my entire text set. Sorry this video is so long, but that's sort of my thing. Thank you so much.